All right, folks. Hey, we're back here. I just wanted to sort of finish up here with the with what I was dealing with in terms of the blueprints and how we were focusing in on them. There was the fact that I only did the set beats and subscribe to quantization event, but what we didn't do was start our actual clock. So for sure, if you don't have a start event, then of course nothing's going to happen. So we're going to pass this out. We're going to say start clock, of course. Start clock. And we've already got our handle hooked up to our start value. So there it is. That's going to be our start clock. And I think that's the end of the entire chain at that point. Nope, set. Yeah, that's actually also very, very important. We too. So remember how we talked about how the name of the clock is important and everything like that, or in this case, the clock handle, right? So we need to actually set this value as a variable. So what we want to do is we want to right click on this. And if you do this, you can actually have the option to promote that pin as a variable. Once you do that, then this will be set as a variable. Now, why is this important? It's important because in reality, again, this is kind of similar to how like you say, hey, clock, clock type, whatever the heck it is, clock, that's, so the name that you give it, that's variable that you give it is actually sort of instantiating it in memory, basically, allocating a certain amount of memory to it and saying that memory is now being occupied by this object. That's the deal, right? What happens is that you can kind of get yourself into slight problems here inside blueprints in a sense by not thinking about it like a programmer would, in the sense that what happens is, oh, hey, I just created a clock. Here's my clock. Oh, I'm just doing, like, for example, oh, I just created a clock. Here's my quartz. There it is. Okay, I'm set my beats per minute. Okay, subscribe to the quantization event. Okay, I'm starting my clock. Okay, that's it. Should be fine. And in actuality, this will work for a little while. But what ends up happening is because you actually haven't set that variable to the clock that you have, and it's just taking that handle that you have, which you created here technically. What we're doing is we make sure that we commit the value for that clock to memory, and we're storing it in memory at that point. Very important, because if we don't do that, what ends up happening is Blueprints already has an automatic garbage collection, which means basically it looks for variables that haven't been essentially like saved into a memory bank and allocated to a particular amount of memory. So what'll happen is it'll actually work for a little while and then it'll just stop. And then you'll be like, what happened? I don't know. And the reason why is because the garbage collector became aware that there was some essentially sort of dangling participle. It's sort of like a situation where like there's just something that's out there, but it's not actually been, committed to memory. And so as a result, it will just dispose of it, and therefore it will just simply stop working. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we set that value. So that's why that set function is there. That all being said, now I need to take a look at a document that I got from the very helpful and very knowledgeable Dan Reynolds at Epic Games. So shout out to Dan for helping me deal with any of this stuff. He will try his best to answer all your questions about audio in Unreal, and especially with blueprints. And it really is a programming language, and it works like a programming language, but it is tricky because it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to treat it like a programming language. So it's a little bit tricky in terms of like getting used to it from my perspective, because I'm used to doing it a certain kinds of way that just seem logical to me. But in reality, you can do some things where you can get yourself into a lot of problems. So we're going to basically kill this. What we're going to try to do is we're going to convert an executable function and convert that function into counting. That's what we're going to do, because right now there's this way where you can take the beats out and everything like that, but the beats will always be hooked up to the actual time signature. In this particular case, for this generative project, I am not interested in a time signature. Yeah, I'm not. I know, that's very weird, but that's the thing. All I care about is a constant beat, a constant pulse. I don't even need a beat. I need a constant pulse. And the thing about it is that every layer is going to have different rhythmic values assigned to that pulse. So I might have one that would be a whole note, or one would be a quarter note, one would be a eighth note, one would be an eighth note triplet. So this create event, probably don't need that just yet, but we will get to it at some point. But what we want to do is subscribe to a quantization, a single quantization event. So we're going to basically drag that over here and see what we got. So we're going to say subscribe to a quantization event. Okay. And we want to drag our clock handle. So we know which one we're looking for. And we want to start our clock because that's important. And we want to have our clock handle. There we go. So that's basically just hooking everything up we did before. We're just doing the same thing that we just did more or less before. So now what we want to do is click on quantization event and put an event in here. And the event is another dispatcher. We're going to say create event. And that means it will then send that event. And then I'm going to have it, the function is going to be create a matching event. And here's the custom event. Okay, so I will say get, I'll say quantize clock. So I'm going to create a set row position. We're not needing our 0 because we're not getting beats anymore. We're just taking the exact beat, the exact pulse, and then counting it from 0 effectively. So we're going to add an add here. And I'll explain this as I go, I suppose. So this is going to be add. That's just going to be operator add. There we go. And we're going to take row position, which I guess we started probably at 0, and then that'll be the idea. Okay, there's my row position. And I'm going to take it out of here. Right, and then he's going to add a modulo. That's right. Okay, so modulo is a little bit interesting. I did actually explain that in some earlier Unity videos. It's very useful. Basically what it does is it limits your count effectively. That's what it does. And then basically it just simply resets the count. So let's say you've set a modulo of 10. It'll go from 0 to 9, and it'll go back to 0. So it doesn't matter how many counts it's going through. Instead of going past 9, it will never go past, 10 items, with 0 being the first item, right? That's the idea. So what we want to do in this case is add ourselves a modulo. And then we have, what he has is basically he created a maximum index value, which is not bad. That's basically a limit value. I could also just simply say, hey, the value is 16, and we're not going to, 16, and not allow any number larger than 16. So we can actually hard code that in there, and that's fine if we wanted to do that. But we can also set that value as being something else, which is going to be important because we do want to be able to make a layer be any number of values past, I would say up to 16 at least. And we might make it longer than that. We'll see how I feel about how well that is easy to do. Anyway, so now the number that comes out of here will be set. And that will do it. So, assuming we have done this correctly, let us go and check that out. So that's what's going on. So essentially, here comes the execution information, whatever, or trigger, execution trigger. And then every time it triggers, technically it's going to be triggering to the quantized value from the main clock. So in other words, it's going to be triggering to whatever value I've selected in here as the quantization boundary. So whatever that I've decided to put it in, that's exactly what it'll be. And then the only important information is that event has to be sort of re-struck or re-hit again. I can't do it on the fly. At the moment, I can't. So the only way this is currently going to work is that I have to stop it, and then if I start it again, then I can do it at different rhythmic values, technically, if I've done it correctly. But I do want to compile, make sure everything's good. And it looks like we're a green light go. Everything's cool. So that seems pretty good to me. And I think we will give it a try. So this is quarter note, so we know that should work generally pretty good. Oh, doesn't work at all. So we have to figure out why that is. Okay, well, we found the problem, actually, it looks like. So the problem is that I had to take my own advice, basically. So in other words, I had to basically have the number and also the execution for set actor location. So I put in the number, but I wasn't executing any value, basically. That's the problem. One thing that's a little bit odd was I was technically, it's increment. Oh, you know what? This should be increment. This should not be plus. This should be increment. There we go. Increment. That goes into there. So that's basically should be fine now, but we shall see what happens. I don't know in terms of the modulo just yet, but I did notice when I did this was that it wanted to start one late. So it's just slightly off kilter here. Let's see what happens. Nope, that didn't work at all. Why are you not working? I mean, we could also can't do this at the same time, right? It's just a one-time deal. So you have to go like that. I don't know if that's even logical. Well, technically it's logical. Will that work? Sort of. I think it's still off by 1. Yeah, anyway. It's close. It's just not quite what I was hoping for. But you can see it's moving, okay? Now, more importantly, stop it and move it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do that. So that's basically what we did. We just basically add the number. We increment the row position. It modulos to 16, which means that at 16 it'll flip back over. It does seem like that's correct, but it does start at the wrong place. I think I remember doing this as being like setting it to a position that was just off of the 0 point, and then it would just start there and then come back, kind of thing. So it was sort of like a starting position for the playhead was off the range, and then it gets on the range essentially. So that can be done. If I needed to make an offset there, I could easily make a positional offset for our playhead instead of starting it directly at that position. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we can do our different quantization. So now we're going to say, hey, our quantization is actually 1.8 or 1/8 instead of a quarter note. So we go like this, and we do hit the compilo thing, and then probably save it again because we didn't save it afterwards. And let's just see if this runs twice as fast, which it probably should. There you go. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, so that's a bit of an accomplishment, I would say. We've got a line. We've got the ability to play it with a click. We've got the ability to be able to rhythmically decide what the value is that we want to, increment by. And my only thing will be I have to figure out how to make this event trigger or subscribe to this event or make something else happen with another trigger that makes this quantized. Actually, what happens in this case would actually make this subscribe to quantization event, I believe, work, because I can't change this on the fly, and I will want to be able to do so at some point, not immediately, but the next step is going to be trying to figure out how to do stuff here, and that's going to take a little bit of time, but basically I've got a pretty good idea of what I want to have happen. I just have to figure out how to make it happen in Blueprints. So we'll see you in the next one. Take care.